Hi, this is Marc Morrell from ToonBarn, and I'm here at San Diego Comic-Con, and we're talking about Beware the Batman. I'm here with Mitch Watson, who's a producer.
Hi.
Hi. All right, so
Yes, sir.
the Alfred character in
Yes.
this one. All right, he's a former MI6.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did that
about?
change in the Alfred character come about?
Okay, so when Glenn and I were first talking about what we wanted to do with the character of Bruce, and that we wanted to basically have this guy who, skill-wise, he's incredibly skilled, you know, but we've always said it's probably about maybe 4 or 5 years into his being Batman. So in terms of the way his life experience is not as high as his skill set is, so, and that creates problems. And so we said, well, what if we put him with a dude who's his closest friend? In the comic books and in the movies, it's always Alfred. Alfred's the one he trusts. And we knew that from the comic books there had been a lot of talk or here and there about Alfred being in MI6 and stuff like that, and which was news shock to me because I didn't know that when we first started working on the show, and then when I started doing the research, it showed up, and I was like, really? Because the character that I see in the comic books and that I see in the movies, maybe a little bit in the Michael Caine version, but I don't really see that. So let's play with that and let's explore that. And the reason we wanted to do that was because if we create a version of Alfred who was more working class, more street smart, and had life experience that Bruce had never had, that just hasn't had yet, we could really play with this sort of father-son relationship between the two of them, and we could really make Alfred an actual, instead of just being a guy who shows up with a tray or every now and then, we could actually make him an integral part of the group. You know, there was a lot of misconceptions earlier that Alfred would be running alongside Batman with guns a-blazing, which doesn't happen. It never was going to happen. It was a publicity art that got out there. But we did want to make an Alfred that was a lot more integral to the stories. So even if he's not fighting besides Bruce or Batman, he's maybe back in the Batcave doing something, or he's helping him with the investigations. He's kind of like Bruce's Watson. If Bruce is Sherlock Holmes, Alfred is his Watson.
That was going to be my next question.
Yes.
I said, forgive me for using your last name,
Sure.
but it's got that Holmes-Watson feel to it.
And that was very much, we were definitely, that was the point. That was what we wanted to do. We wanted him to be this guy who was sort of a foil for Batman, who, as people have noted, I know in some of the reviews and on the blogs and online, that Bruce or Batman makes mistakes. He's not impervious to pain. He does overestimate his abilities sometimes, and that's all on purpose. We wanted to show a guy who's still growing into it, and now you have Alfred, who is a guy who's probably been through all of that at one point in his life, but now he's growing old, you know, and now at some point he knows if Bruce is in his early 30s and Alfred is in his mid-60s, he's not going to be around forever. So then we said, okay, and this is how we came up with using Katana. So we need somebody that Alfred starts, you know, part of Alfred's storyline is like, who's going to replace me if I need to get replaced? And so we thought Alfred wouldn't just trust anybody to work with Bruce. He would have to be somebody that he knew personally. He would have to be somebody that he would trust with the secret, even though they don't tell Katana at first. So that was how we created the idea of, well, what if Alfred had a partner, you know, back in MI6, and that partner had a daughter, and then the idea was that Alfred's partner died under mysterious circumstances, which we will find out about more later. And if Alfred took upon the role of sort of bringing up Katana, so Katana sort of came before Bruce, you know, and we're going to find out later in the back half of the season that there's a sort of a third member of that family, which we don't know about yet, which is going to cause some problems. But so Katana, but the backstory with is that he, once the partner died, he sort of took over the role of father figure to Katana. He brought her to America because at this time she's of Asian descent, but they were living in England at the time. He brought her over to America, put her in American boarding schools, and then they sort of lost touch and I can't give away why because it'll be in the episodes, but. So now we sort of created this family unit, and that was what we wanted to do. So if you have Alfred as the father and Bruce and Katana as sort of the two siblings, you know, in a way. And we just thought that we can't do all of that with the traditional Alfred. We could only really do that if we sort of push the character in this particular direction. So that's the long-winded answer to the Alfred thing.
Okay, thank you for setting up that storyline.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's great. It's one of my favorite. There's a couple of storylines that play out throughout. There's one that involves Barbara Gordon, which I'm really, really happy with, and the way that turned out. But the Bruce Katana Alfred relationship was very important, and it's really it's what infuses the entire series. And we tell two different. The season is broken up into two halves, and although the stories are standalone, what's going on emotionally with the characters, there's a certain story we wanted to tell with them in the first half, and a certain story we wanted to tell with them in the second half. And it works. So it's always nice when it works. So there you go.
Well, thank you very much for joining us on ToonBarn. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.